This podcast is brought to you by Give Us Mo Entertainment and by Vizard.ai.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Arete Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jake, and I am joined by a guest that I'm very, very excited to introduce everyone to, Dr. Albert Bramante. Geez, you've got a lot on your resume. You're a talent agent, talent scout. You're an author, a published author. You have your Ph.D. And what is your Ph.D. in?
It's in straight psychology, educational
Okay,
psychology.
you are a hypnotherapist. Did I miss any accolades?
No, that's pretty much it.
Covers it?
Uh,
Well, so this is going to be, I enjoy nerding out, so this is going to be very fun for me, and hopefully it'll be fun for you too. So we're going to get right into it. As I said, you are a published author, and on this channel, it's no secret. You can't tell from my new background to those that have, are faithful viewers. My bookshelf is not here because I am not. I'm in a different location, and I won't have my bookshelf here for a couple of months. So that makes me sad. But we love books on this channel. So can you tell us a little bit about your book?
sure, it's called Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. And I've been a talent agent for 21 years now. And one of the things that I was noticing, a big theme that was happening, especially in the beginning, that I was seeing a lot of was actors were self-sabotaging or shooting themselves in the foot or being their own worst enemy, depending on how you look at it. And a lot of it was really perplexing in the beginning to me because it was like, why are these actors really holding themselves back, like being their own worst enemy? And so it really took time um, for me to figure out what was going on. And that's why when I was going for my PhD, I planned on examining this for my dissertation. And so my doctoral dissertation was on self-defeating behavior in performing artists.
Excellent. And book is available on Amazon. And I have a feeling, which that's my next question, it's not just for the artist types, but my follow-up to that, because I read a little bit about what your book was about. Unfortunately, didn't have time to read it beforehand because you and I got together on this relatively quickly. So thank you for
Yes, of
coming on so quickly.
course.
But
Thanks for inviting me.
I
Mhm.
do plan on reading it because it sounds absolutely fascinating from what I read. But in your opinion, what would you say, if you had to pick one, what would you say is the most common thing that's holding actors back in their careers?
I think the biggest thing is the self-doubt. And there's the industry is incredibly challenging to begin with. The odds are already kind of stacked against most actors. It really takes some perseverance to move forward. And there's going to be a lot of no's before there's going to be yeses. I mean, that's the reality. No matter how talented of an actor you are, it's because it's always saturated. Now, I'm based in New York, and New York has about 150 average, 150,000 actors, which is a lot. And LA is almost at double that. So if you like, I would say estimate at least 5 to 600,000 actors across the country, just in the U.S. alone. And I'm talking about people who make the vow to do this professionally.
Mhm.
So you only have a handful of roles. So in reality, the statistics from recent like performance unions is only 2% are going to make a living enough to sustain out of all this numbers, which is not a high, which is a very low number.
And by sustain, do you mean just be able to make a living, not necessarily become a famous?
Right. I'm talking about like living off and having a living wage just being an actor. So 97 to 98% of actors are going to need some other income sources to sustain living expenses because it's not cheap to live, especially in these cities,
No.
major cities. There's a lot. It's very expensive. So there's that. So, but also because of this, constant putting yourself out there, making yourself vulnerable for auditions, and then, receiving no feedback because very often you're told no by silence. It's like, okay, you said you do this audition. Very rarely do you get told no explicitly. You just have to assume if you don't hear anything in the next 2 days, you're not getting the role. I mean, most of the time, sometimes there are exceptions to that, but it's kind of like that. No news is news. Like no, so that can be a bit of a challenge at times. And sometimes when actors even are told no, they're very appreciative. It's like, well, thankfully somebody got back to me and told me no. So there's a lot of that, and I think just constantly making yourself vulnerable and then not getting the role eventually is going to start adding up after a while. And then, of course, you have well-intentioned family and friends who don't have a clue on how the industry works. And they're going to be like, well, you've been tired of acting for 6 months and you haven't had a job. You think it's time to, like get a real job? And unfortunately, mainstream society doesn't really consider actors as a real occupation.
No, I'm not acquainted with too many actors, but I know quite a few people in the music industry, and it's similar. It's a little different, but it's similar. There's a whole lot of no's, and there's a lot of unpaid or low paid gigs, and a lot of,
Hmm.
and even then, I've known a few people in the pro wrestling sphere, and it's even worse there. There's a saying amongst pro wrestlers that you drive, 200 miles for a handshake and a hot dog, and every time you work, you put your body at risk. But I'm not going to say it's unfortunate because I'm not in that industry, but to me, it seems very unfortunate. But it is
Yeah,
something where you have to love it because you're going to pay those dues. It's extremely rare for someone to get catapulted to even, I'd say, mid-level status in a short amount of time. You hear
yeah,
all these stories, even some of the biggest names have been doing it for 15 years before they got to
yeah.
a
Or before they
major
even got
place.
noticed sometimes.
Yeah.
And or you'll hear like, oh, well, so and so became an overnight success, but you don't realize that it took them 20 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah.
So it really there's a lot of hard work, and this is kind of like where I wish a lot of the acting, the performance educating programs, like in the high school performing arts or the colleges that are turning out these theater majors and theater kids they should be told proper education. Like, look, okay, this is if you really love this, great, but here's the reality. It's going to take time because maybe not necessarily New York, but like a lot of regional schools, throughout the U.S. A lot of times these kids are not prepared. And I say kids because they're a lot younger, 20, 21,
Yeah.
22. They're about to graduate and, they may have acted, in every school production because they're in that school. There's not a whole talent pool. So now when they get out of school, instead of competing with a few actors to get the role, you're going to be competing with thousands sometimes to get the same role, especially if you're going for Broadway, because especially in New York, that's the Broadway capital world. There's thousands of actors that are moved each year to come to New York with their eyes set on Broadway, and only a limited number of roles. So the amount of competition has to be intense, which means your skill level has to be really sharp
Yeah, for
because
sure.
it's not just average. You can't just be average. You've got to be better, much strong. And this is why sometimes a lot of actors, what I see my years of doing this, they'll come to New York with bright eyes and so excited, and then in 2 or 3 years they're dejected and back on a plane home with their dreams crushed.
Yep.
And a lot of the frustration you'll hear today, well, I did this for 2 or 3 years, and I want to correct them and say it's been only 2 or 3 years.
it's funny to me how much of this translates to other areas because, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of experience with acting or actors. But you had mentioned, overnight successes take time. One of my favorite quotes ever. I don't know if you're familiar with Diamond Dallas Page, another pro wrestler, but he tells the story because after he retired from that, he created a hybrid yoga system, and they
Hmm.
did an appearance on Shark Tank, and they were an overnight success. But he's said this in a documentary and a lot of other times in interviews, and he says, yeah, but what you didn't see was the 8 years in emptying bank accounts. So we were an 8 year overnight success.
Yeah, and there probably was a lot of reiterations on their product before they
It
presented
used to
it to
be,
Shark.
yeah, it used to be called, ironically, because he didn't want to put his name on it, because he didn't want to pollute it with the pro wrestling of it all. It used to be called Yoga for Regular Guys. And once they rebranded it and pushed it out, because they were already starting to get traction when they rebranded as DDP Yoga, but Shark Tank, obviously, with their viewership, and this was in 2007, I think. So Shark Tank viewership was it was a whole nother level at that time. But yeah, so I always tell people similar to in this because we have a podcast network, and just about at any point, every single podcast host comes to me and says, it's not working. I'm like, well, you're only in your second season. Like
Yeah,
you're just
you
getting your
know,
feet wet. You're still screwing up. Like
of course, it's like come to me when you're on like episode 2 or 300, and then maybe we'll have that conversation at that,
yeah,
because that's what I was hearing too. I mean, even with because I'm looking, that's something I'm looking into too, my own. But I was looking even into that where it's like one of the stats which surprised me that like 90% of podcasters quit after the first 10 episodes because they might not see a high number of downloads in the beginning, and it's like, well, that means it's no, you've got to get known.
you won't.
It's like you
Yeah,
won't.
I
And
tell people. Yeah, I tell people all the time. It's like there's only two. Well, there's only three ways, but one's super rare, and the other two are much more common. There's only three ways that you can possibly get a large successful podcast in a short amount of time. One being that you're already famous and you have an existing brand or name, which you see celebrities all the time. It's like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast. And in the first week, they get 1 million views. Well, that's because you already had an audience. The second way is your podcast is about something that's extremely popular. So you'll see this sometimes, and we have one on the network, and I'm not cutting them up because their podcast is great, but like the Goosebumps crew, there's an existing fan base there. So you're already predisposed to get attention because of what you're
Mhm.
talking about. And the third way is you just are extremely lucky. There are some rare cases, and I shudder to say, even like Logan and Jake Paul, who were kind of, but even they had a media machine behind them that people don't really know about, but they did kind of sort of in the zeitgeist come out of nowhere, even though they didn't. There was management behind them, but they appeared to be, and this happens a lot with influencers, they appear to come out of nowhere, but you don't see the agents and the media people behind them that are pushing them. And they're the ones that are calling Google and saying, hey, we got this thing,
Yeah.
let's push this in the algorithm because it will generate money.
Or how many thousands of money do they put in ads that they,
Well, that
throw?
too, yeah. YouTube
That,
ads are
of course,
tricky, yeah, but absolutely, you're absolutely right. To tie it back into what we were talking about, though, about things holding people
perseverance.
back,
Yes.
yeah. In your opinion, because I think it does, just full transparency, do you think that same thing applies to other people who don't have showbiz careers but still feel like they're not meeting their success goals, but they're not really sure why?
Yeah, and there could be a number of reasons. I talk about this a lot in my book. Is what are your goals? Because that's important. What when you say you're not meeting your goals, the first thing I would like if somebody said that would be like, okay, so what are your goals, and what exactly are you not meeting? Because again, if your goal is to be on Broadway in 2 years, I would tell you don't even set yourself on that. I would say a more reasonable goal would be to working professionally, or maybe to be in the Actors Equity Union in 2 years. That might be a more reasonable goal to set, and also to be forgiving too. Like maybe you may not exactly hit your goal in that amount of time, but it would be more of a way, even if you're close to it. So even going back, like in the podcasting sense, I may not, I think like I'm gonna have 1 million downloads a month in 2 years. That's unrealistic, and I think right away it would be setting myself up for failure. But if I said I'd like to have a consistently well-oiled produced podcast in 2 years, that's a better, more of a reasonable goal.
And that's a much more attainable goal because there are
Yeah,
concrete things you can do. And I'll delve into this a little bit later because this is where I nerd out because in our network we have some things that mostly I put in place to kind of help people get started. And some of those are tutorial videos. And in the very first tutorial video, it's like manage expectations, but at the same time, don't stop because the worst thing you can do is stop.
yeah, and that's the one thing too, and that's with any type of social media or content creation is got to be consistent and pull through. Because one, and I've heard a lot of even hosts and influencers say this too, is that you could put out a piece of content and it may not be viewed right away, but then 2 years later, all of a sudden you're getting traction on something that you posted. And I'm assuming the same for a podcaster. Like an
It's
episode may just
so
blow up
weird. It's
a couple
so
years
weird.
later.
I stopped trying to figure it out because it's so random. Some things that'll just pop off after days or weeks or even people revisit. Like even we have podcast episodes that did okay when they aired, but then a year later there's this resurgence of interest and it's so weird to me. It's almost inexplicable. So you just kind of roll with it. When your mission is to just create the content, it's like you said, if your goal is to create good, polished content, then you will meet your goals every time, regardless of if it goes viral or if, because somebody out there will watch it and love what you're doing. And that
Yeah,
is the best part. That's the part that I love.
absolutely. And somebody you're gonna eventually gonna produce something that's gonna resonate with someone, and that someone's gonna tell their friends and their family, and next thing you're gonna start getting some downloads. But yeah, and the same thing with an acting role. It's gonna take a while. If you're officially unknown and new to the city, because that's what people ask me, like, okay, I moved to New York. I'm right. I'm like, I'm ready for Broadway. I'm like, no, okay. Your first goal should be getting in the next 6 months, getting used to getting around the city
Mhm.
first. That's your first goal. Getting around, getting acclimated to the city, and then slowly getting to know the people. The first couple of years is about getting to know the key players, industry players in the city, and knowing who is who and and working on the branding and all of that. And then that would be the next step is to slowly start building. But I think because we're living in the age of social media, that there's an instant gratification thing. We want it now, or tomorrow, we set to do something, and then we don't get it. It's what's wrong, and so it's with actors. It's just you just give up too fast, or you don't, or you just get discouraged very easily.
Yeah, that's definitely true. True what they say, youth is wasted on the young, but it's funny because I do come across people who half the time, and trust me, we'll get into this part of what I do. They will ask my advice, and I'm like, my first reaction is, well, what are you asking me for? Like, I'm not the what most people would consider the success story of a podcast. The only thing I can say that I think it deserves any sort of accolade is consistency. That's about it because we've been going strong in various forms for about 5 years now, and we haven't quit. So that's about
Yeah.
it. But I do tell people, I said, just in life generally, social media is a lie. Don't believe it.
Uh-huh.
It is not true.
Yeah, because it's so easy to make sensational claims and very, very unrealistic. Because there was one thing, I don't really see ads for it anymore, but I used to. It was both infuriating and funny at the same time. But it was like, pay $27 and you can be a professional actor. take this 5-day video class and you could be acting with Marlon Brando and all those people and acting in those in high caliber Hollywood movies. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, this is some really incredible BS. And of course, when you go on the page, because I was very curious, when you go to buy a $27 product, of course, there's a bunch of upsells that before you know, you're spending several $100s on
Hmm.
a false hope.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see this too. There, that since I've become like interested in I do podcasts. I cannot tell you how many ads on my social media are about, really build up your podcast. I'm like, really? And then I look up the host, and really they're marketers and are just kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't have a clue about.
I have a little truism that I like to say so much, and it's if it's such a great idea, wouldn't you want to keep it a secret? Like if
Well,
it's so
yeah,
successful, and it's true because anytime I see something like that, well, I have this course to show you how I did. I'm like, well, what? Why wouldn't you just keep making $3 million a year? Why wouldn't you keep that a
yeah,
secret?
and that's the whole thing too. And I would sit there and wonder, well, how do you have the time if you're making seven figures doing this? How do you have the time to do all, to put a course together and to sell it and then to mentor people? Oh, but you require a 4 or 5 figure price tag to that. That's how you're making your 7 fit. Got it.
Well,
Sounds cool.
that and they're paying somebody in the Philippines or Pakistan or Nigeria or somewhere around the world, $100 a month to do all the video work for them. Um,
Yeah,
that's
and do so.
obscenely common. That's obscenely common. In fact, funnily enough, I don't think I've told this story because I don't really like to trash talk, so I'm not going to name names. But I followed because I genuinely like the videos, and this whole idea of a faceless YouTube channel has really gained a lot of traction, especially with the proliferation of AI, which we are going to touch on. Because
Yes,
we use AI too, but I have two rules when it comes to AI, and my business partner in other areas, Max, this is him off so much. But I said I have two rules when it comes to AI. I will never use it without being transparent when I use it to generate something, and two, whenever I can, I'm going to turn it into a joke because I love to laugh. So I actually created a podcast called the AI Analysis Podcast, where I use Google
yeah,
Notebook LM. I did it just to play with it, but then I made something and I'm like, wow, this is actually entertaining. But the joke is that these are hosts that don't actually exist. And it's very transparent that they don't actually exist. And it's funny because the AI will sometimes make them say something like if they're talking about a movie, one of the hosts will be like, "Oh yeah, I took my kids to see that." And I'm just like, "No, you didn't. You don't exist. Why would you say that? Why would it
yeah,
generate that?" But it's a lot of fun. But anyway, back to the story. This person, because I don't even know if it was his voice, probably not. Actually, well, no, because his presentation was AI generated too. But I digress. He had an advertisement for his a free webinar showing you how you could grow your YouTube. And I'm like, okay, that's not an unrealistic promise because he's not promising millions of views, not in the ad anyway. So, and I said, and it's free. So, worst case scenario, I lose a couple hours of my time, no big deal. The whole thing was an infomercial. Like it was a laughable infomercial about
yeah,
how, it was a 2 hour presentation and an hour and 48 minutes of it was literally him talking about how he did it without explaining how he did it. And then the final 20 so minutes was just a sales pitch for think it was a there were different levels, but I think it was like a $1,700 course. And then for $500 a month, you get support and one-on-one Zoom calls with me. And I just checked out. I'm like, I knew it. It was too good to be true.
yeah,
So my obnoxious thing with Arete Media, which is our podcast network, is it's free. We don't charge you a dime. In fact, we try to help you make money. And why do we do that? Because I'm the world's worst salesperson. I make this joke in my day job all the time. I'm a terrible salesperson. Everything is transparent, everything is designed to help you succeed. And I don't want you to pay me. Now, full disclaimer, because there are going to be some people who's like, well, Jake, you didn't say this. If I edit your podcast for you, I will put ads in it. But
yeah.
that's it. And fully transparent, and you get a commission off of those ads if and when, there's payment. So you're welcome. But anyway, that
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean that would be like a big thank you. People should be thanking for that
oh, and they
because
do. Like nobody is
yeah,
not grateful. But
because that is, I mean, really, and I would be thinking that most people would say, okay, yeah, well, you do what you want. I mean, putting the legwork to edit it. You should
nobody
make some
said
more.
anything yet. But I'm telling you, because anytime I approach somebody or anytime I've spoken to somebody about that, the first question out of their mouth is, well, like how much money is it? Because and I get it, because it's an internet person that you don't know sending you a random message telling you that they want to help you start or grow your podcast, and your first instinct
Mhm.
is how much is this going to cost me? And it's free.
Yeah.
It's 100% free. So if you have an idea for a podcast, hit me up. But
Well, that's the thought. Yeah, because I have a couple. So, but and that's just in general is just realistic. I think it all just falls down to what's realistic expectation. Helping you grow your podcast is a realistic thing to say. I'm not going to talk, but there are two people I kind of want to that I kind of ran into that were like, you can make a 7-figure podcast. I'm like, okay, I'm sure it can be done. I know Joe Rogan probably does that easily, but that's not the average podcast. Is not going to do that.
not
I
even
know that.
close. Not even close.
Yeah, and it just became like, okay, first it was like a 5-day challenge, and it was like a VIP, and then coaching, and it was just like so
Yeah.
many offers that by the end of it, it was like, thousands of dollars that, this person was asking for. And you get 100 people, you're making your 7 figures right there.
Oh,
And
precisely.
you don't even
Yeah.
have a podcast. And I'm like,
Right.
and the thing, and I see the same even in the acting community. It's like, I can make you a better actor. These programs that sell these services about like, I can make you a better actor, I can help you book work, but it's going to require, a hefty deposit. So,
See, the frustrating thing with that though is I've come across certain things, and it's hard to discern now. Occasionally, you will find something that is worthwhile, and it is going to cost you some money. But my guidance there would be pay really close attention about what they're saying they're going to give you. If, especially if it's someone that you know who they are and are aware of their work, and they say, hey, listen, I've got this course, it's 6 weeks, and these are the things we're going to teach you, but it's not promising you things that seem unrealistic. That might be worth your while if you have the money. It just depends on what field you're in, right? But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
again, if I'm gonna give you the tools that you need to start it. Fine, that's realistic. Okay, great. 6 weeks is a reasonable time. But if you're gonna tell me that I'm gonna be making 6 figures in 6 weeks, no. And the thing is that they a lot of times when people make these purchases, they're impulse purchases.
hmm
These influencers are very good at writing good copy to trigger your emotional side of your brain, which is then your purchase side. So
hmm
one of the things, I've done this too. I've been, like where I have to sometimes just, okay, let's marinate on this for some time before I make a thing. Another, I think, red flag is when it's like, you must sign up now at the end of this call or this thing is going away. I'm like, that is so classic Psych 101, the law of
yeah.
scarcity.
Oh, they
Because
teach
I've
that.
got,
Yeah, they teach
yeah,
that in
that's
those
stuff,
courses. You create
yeah, I have it.
scarcity. Yeah.
Free and scarcity are like the two different things because even like sometimes I dead ship like old emails and it was like the same thing. Deadline is 11:59 tonight. Now, meanwhile, the email was dated 6 months ago. I would just randomly click on the link and the offer's still there. I'm like, oh, how do you
It's
like that?
it's always
It's
still
not.
there
Yeah,
because they want to keep selling it.
yeah,
But it
but
works.
we have a fear of missing out, the FOMO,
hmm
which is that, okay, that's a target, that's a psychological target. And actually, I kind of think it would be great to do podcast episodes on this topic alone, like just this little
Oh yeah,
awareness. Like,
you could
don't,
cover. Yeah, you could
Don't
cover so
fall for
much.
this stuff because, and here's why, it's that the law of scarcity. Or, and I'm not saying that there are a lot of great free stuff out there. I mean, there's a lot of great free content out there. But there's also, like what you said, that infomercial thing where you get maybe one or two like little gold nuggets in there, but and then you're under that obligation because your brain thinks, okay, well they did something free that was nice of them, so I must return the favor. Here's my call, here's my information, take my money. That's why, like, very often you'll get one of the classic charities that would try to finagle money out of you. They would give you if everybody remembers that were listening to the 70s and 80s, there used to be the Hare Krishna would give you a flower in a hotel. That flower was not the generosity of their own heart. That there was motivation behind that.
There absolutely was. Yeah, I have
And or
a.
just like
Oh,
if
go
you go to
ahead.
Costco and get those free samples.
Yeah, yeah. I have a
Yeah,
copy. I have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita simply because and he gave us three books. Actually, it was me and my nephew, and out of the kindness of his heart. But then the hand, which I mean, we gave him $5 because that was A, that was all I had in cash, and B, those three books alone were worth well more than $5 out of a bookstore. So I considered it value added for me, but it was still kind of like it felt a little sleazy, not gonna lie.
yeah, yeah. It is, and that's why I'm like, when somebody says, "Oh, I'm getting a free gift," or no, no, you're not. That's not free.
No.
Or free lunch. No, there's no, and that's why the popular saying there's no such thing as a free lunch because especially in timeshares, they used to do this a lot. We're gonna do a five course meal. It's gonna be on us, and you just come and be ready for some high pressure sales. On
So
that on the
So confession, I actually love those things because I my background is and my day job is sales. So I know all the dirty little and plus I have zero qualms with just getting up and walking out of the room. I know a lot of people feel like that's rude, but I'm like, no, you're coming here for a sales pitch, and if they're a little too obnoxious, like you can leave. Like you're
well,
under no obligation to humor
yeah,
these people.
and most of the time, those sales people are not going to be offended when you leave
No, they
because
get
they
it.
know it. They know they. But again, they're not going to stop you if you want to stay. If you want to open up your wallet, great. I don't find it like necessary, but I just find it hilarious sometimes. Or
They're very entertaining, is why I love them.
and sometimes I'm just going like, I see what's going on here. I see what you're doing. Great job. Like, because I remember one time I was walking in New York City at night, and this one female came up to me and she tried to sell me cologne, bootleg, of course. And I mean, it was I'm not a cologne type person, so I wouldn't have. But she was like, she kept coming up and trying to compliment me, and I turned to her and I went, you know, kind of like in that nice way. I went, yeah, I know what you're doing because you don't you're not you know interested in me personally. You're interested in how many vials of that cologne I'm going to buy from you right now. She wasn't too happy, but hey, I mean that was. But flattery is another tactic that's very often used.
And how.
Build people up, make people feel so appreciated, and because again, you're acting. That's why, like a lot of these seminars, and I've been to a lot of these too, where these motivational seminars are all about making you feel great. As soon as you feel great, okay, here's my next offer. I've been to, especially on a couple of Tony Robbins free events.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's great value. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Tony,
Yeah,
and
I've got
and
nothing
I
against
think
Tony.
and I think there's a lot of value in there, but and I see people getting so upset, like these ups. I'm like, no, they're a business. At the end of the day, it's a business, it's a corporation. They have a right to do that. Just like I have a right to, okay, I'm gonna put my computer on mute right now. I don't want to hear the upsell, but I want to hear it. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
hear it. I'm not gonna buy it. I'm not gonna
Yep.
get offended. I'm not gonna be all huffy and buffy about it. I'm gonna hit the mute button and I'm gonna move on.
Yeah.
So,
Because nobody
but
nobody is forcing you to make that call or put your credit card information in.
not at all. I mean, but again, it may feel like it is because it's about the manipulation. if you're not privy to it, it might feel like, oh, I'm being forced. No, you're not. You're not being forced at all. You can
There
easily.
there is admittedly a very thin line between manipulation and coercion, and sometimes they dance on it, but
Yeah. Well, it's not. If you look at in a nutshell, it's not coercion, but like I said, it's maybe right on the line. It's right dancing right up to it, but it's very effective in what they're doing. I mean, I don't know if you've been watching on social media, but there was a launch event a couple weeks ago with Alex Hermosi.
I've not seen it.
So he did this big. He's big on this $100 million launch thing. So he wrote this book, $100 million deal, and he did a launch for a new edition of it. And so he did this free event that you can go to, and it was several hours long that you went to, but most of it was an infomercial, like QVC style. And at the end was a $6,000 high ticket offer, where you were donate, and I use donate in quotation marks, 200 books to aspiring entrepreneurs, and you get all of this in return, like this AI version of him and these other books. And people were on social media, and I thought it was actually quite successful campaign, because you had a lot of people that were loving it, and you had a lot of people that were trashing Alex Hermosi all over social media. And I'm thinking, like, well, people don't realize, even the people that are trashing Alex Hermosi, he's getting publicity on it, because now people are hearing about this Alex Hermosi webinar that people are not going to be clicking on the watch. And he made over $100 million in sales, which is what he writes about, how to make $100 million deals. So when people are like trashing him, I want to just, if I ever had to meet him, I was like, well played, sir. That was brilliant.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, that's a great.
That's wonderful. And what you did. So I don't, and that's the whole thing too. Like, if you're getting triggered by that goes back to the whole your emotional state. That's something with you, because that's not worth it being triggered over. If you don't like it, shut the webinar off and go about your day. Or say no, thank you. If you're on the phone, you know what? Thank you for your time. Click. I'm not going to move forward. And I've done that too with people. Like, well, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not going to move forward with this. Thank you for your time. And I don't wait for them to respond. They just be gracious enough and hang up. But it goes back to your emotional state. And, and I think a lot of times we hope, another thing that sabotages is going back to expecting that instant win, or, trying to find that guru or that person that's going to be the answer to our problems. And this is, again, what these people, marketers, are banking on, that you have this mentality. But the reality is, yes, there's a lot of great programs out there. There's a lot of great help out there. A lot of great resources out there. It takes perseverance, and there's no program, there's no course that's going to help that overcome that. You have to persevere. You have to be disciplined and focused. And that's with anything, whether you're an actor, a host, an influencer, a content creator, a coach, an athlete. Perseverance is so important. And grit and discipline.
Hi, I'm Rose Emanuel.
I'm Justin Cole.
And we are launching our production company,
Give Us Mo. We are currently filming from the iconic I Love Lucy soundstage. Check out the pictures.
And maybe we can call this soundstage one of the homes for our productions.
We currently have 3 shows that we want to put through production.
One of which is called It Only Happens with Rose, and it's actually a love letter to I Love Lucy and situational comedy.
Members Only is a workplace comedy similar to The Office or Parks and Recreation that is set in a ritzy, rich country club.
And then our last project is called M, which is a prequel in the James Bond franchise, which follows Judi Dench's character when she was a spy in the 1960s.
These productions are unfortunately, but understandably, not cheap.
So your support means the world to us, and you can help us get props, cast, crew, maybe even a soundstage.
Your contributions and your shares help tremendously.
We appreciate everything you guys do for us and have done for us in the past.
Absolutely. And we have some cool perks for you to check out as well.
If you believe in us, we can make our dream into a reality.
Be sure to visit giveusmoentertainment.com for more information.
Let's create some momentum. That was so cheesy, I love it. Make sure to follow along on our journey.
Thanks. A bunch.
Cheers. And that's a wrap.
So one of the things I talk about in the book is the idea of conscientiousness. And conscientiousness is a personality trait that refers to like your discipline, your work ethic, and how focused you are. This is one of the biggest predictors of success in anything you do in life. So a lot of times, especially with actors that I work with, they're so focused sometimes on in their dream state, which is great, but they lack the business side of it, because it's called show business for a reason. There's a business side. So I actually would like to see, I know this is easier said than done, but I like to see some acting training programs having some business classes in there, thrown in there. Like, again, so you have the business acumen or at least intuition or know how to run the business. Because that's what you're running. Even if you're a creative, you're still an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I get it, because it's especially when you're not necessarily just getting started, but when you haven't really had that grand level of success yet, it's really hard to say no, even when you know in your gut that this deal or this proposal or this thing is probably not the best thing for you, but it's something. So
Yeah.
I think having more training in that would be invaluable, because again, not just to actors, because you rarely hear about the person who turned down a deal or an offer and came out better from it, because everybody always talks about the one that got away as opposed to the one that I ran the hell away from.
Yeah. And I saw there's a lot of examples even on Shark Tank where they've gotten proposals from the sharks with deals and they said no. And yeah, sometimes it may have not worked out, but there were times where they actually made a lot more than what they would have had they taken those deals, because they had the knowledge enough to walk away.
Yep.
So I think just having the knowledge of what is realistic, like what, and then you could start to look at the anatomy of that offer. How is it phrased? Is it realistic? If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is.
Almost always. But then again, too, something you can kind of learn, and again, not just in acting, but I'm going to use an acting example, is, the more familiar you are with your craft or your business, the more you can sort of discern those decisions. I always like to bring up, everybody wants to work with Martin Scorsese, and you hear all these stories. Jonah Hill for Wolf of Wall Street comes to mind, where he agreed to be basically paid SAG minimum wage to be in a Martin Scorsese film. He understood that long term, that's a good deal, because he got roles out of that, and he got to work with Martin Scorsese, and he was a co-star with Leonardo DiCaprio. For another director, may not have been an advantageous deal.
Right.
It just, you have to learn how to discern, because again, to take it to a different level, like a Google internship or an internship with Meta, even if it's unpaid, is, if you can manage it, obviously, that's probably worthwhile for you if that's where you want to go into. But an internship at your local, what's a good example? Your local real estate office's social media department, which consists only of you, an unpaid internship, probably not worth your while. But then again, for you, it might be, because at the end of the day, it's still experience, even if it's not glamorous. It just depends on where you are.
And that's where you have to be strategic about it too, because like I said, that think about with working on the Wolf of Wall Street, what that did for Jonah Hill's career. So he's now making tenfold that. You don't know if he would have had the same success had he turned that down. He might not have.
Yeah, you don't know.
So you have to take strategic, and that's the same thing with you might have to do some unpaid work as an actor in the beginning, in these because you have to build your resume and your demo reel up. But after a while, you're gonna work on this person's more than a couple days on a film you're not getting paid for, probably not a good idea anymore. They should be paying something of the wage. Now, again, at least we shouldn't be. Most actors are not doing this initially for the money. Yes, when you hit the A-list level, the money can be really great. But when you're first starting out, no. And I think that's another mistake when people go into, I want to go into show business because I'm going to be rich. I'm like, no, that's not why you do that.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
a
I can tell
very
you that.
it's a
Not a good
very
reason.
very low percentage. Speaking of getting started in acting, though, I read in a book a long time ago. I think it was actually in it was my textbook for one of my film classes, and it basically, I'm paraphrasing here. It says that the genre to get started in because they can be extremely low budget and be very successful, whether it's indie film or student projects or even just building up your reel, um, was horror, like doing a horror film or a horror series. But
Hmm.
my question for you is, in 2025, do you think that still holds true, or as somebody who represents and advises talent, would you recommend another way in 2025? Or is the horror film a really good launch pad because you can point to a lot
Well,
of
I
people
have a
who,
I have a client now who's working steadily in, but they're no budget, very low budget, but he's working a lot. He keeps getting called back because a lot of times, if you look at like a lot of the campy horror movies, especially in the '70s and '80s, you'll see the same people in every movie.
Mhm.
And that's great if you're looking to have fun and do this. Now, if your motivation is to make money, then I wouldn't be doing, because most horror movies are very low budget. It's really almost laughably dumb. I'm sure you may have heard about this brand, but there was a big brand for years called Troma, Lloyd Kaufman. One very successful. I mean, he had cults, he had his own like film festivals across the country, large cult following, and they produced hundreds of movies. But the movies were so insanely low budget, it was like literally in someone's backyard, and really ridiculous props. And it was actually designed to be so bad. Like the production value was minimal, shoestring, but yet they had a large following. Now, if your goal is to have fun and tell stories, great. Um, and then eventually you may say, okay, I've done a couple of budget horror movies. I have a demo reel, and it depends on your role. Like this is particularly one thing to be careful for is if you're an actress, because very often these low budget horror movies are going to require you to be nude, and I would advise against that initially in the beginning. To be nude, because a lot of times there's no context there. It's just okay. Here's a random couple of nude girls walking in the scene. There's no storyline. Because I actually had to turn this down for a client who's starting on active, and this filmmaker approached her, was like supposed to be this mafia Italian movie. They wanted her to play for nudity, and they're only gonna pay her $75. And I went, okay. I was like, well, what's the role? Well, they don't really tell me yet. Yeah, that's a big red flag.
That's a massive red
Uh,
flag.
I'm like, and I advised her. I mean, well, ultimately we turned it down, but it was just wow. So I would say yes to horror movies, but also because it's 2025 and social media and all that, you don't want to do something that's going to kind of come back and harm you or bite you in the ass. We are going to be, new, if we do a new scene, that may come back, because if I Google your name and, you're in zombie, sluts number 4, I'm going to kind of guess that, it wasn't a substantive role.
Most
So
likely
I would
not.
say,
But Zombie Sluts
yeah,
5.
yeah, no, now that can be but again, I would just say, just be careful about the type of role, be discerning. That's easy. You get cast in a movie, it's great. It's such a great feeling. But do your research. Read the script before. One of the things if someone comes to me and like, they want to offer my client a role, the one thing the next thing I say is, send me the script. unless
Yeah.
it's, of course, like a network project or something really established. But if you're looking, I want to see the script before we. And I tell my client, I'm like, you're going to read the script thoroughly before you accept.
Yeah,
And if you have
absolutely.
any reservations, we're going to either try to work them through up front or we're going to turn it down.
Well, and I think
And
there's probably a lot of actors and actresses, and this is probably a bad example because Mila Kunis was, I mean, she's still famous, but she was extremely famous at the time. She's sort of infamous for never wanting to do nudity. So in the movie Friends with Benefits, when she does the shot of her posterior, it was a body double, and from what I understand, she insisted on that.
mhm,
But she has the power to do that.
yes, and even the scenes that like the big budget movies that do require nudity, there's something called an intensity coordinator. There's again doubles, and again a lot of it is just maneuvering camera angles. It's not because a lot of times between prosthetics and doubles, very rarely you're getting fully nude on camera.
Hmm.
Unless or really engaging in intercourse. A lot of times it's all choreographed. Because I remember one time I was watching, I was on a stage production, and this couple, of course, there was a lot of making out scenes, and I kind of found out very interesting because somebody asked, "Were you actually kissing?" And they're like, "No,"
Yeah, I guess
but it looked like,
there's a thumb trick that I was told about, but I've never really understood how that works
yeah,
for.
yeah, and it was because also it was far away. You couldn't. I mean,
Hmm.
they were going. It was like they were dancing, doing the. It looked like they were the way they were standing with each other and embracing. So it looked like, and they had the sound effects of kissing,
Hmm.
but there was no kissing actually being done. And but that's what that's what a high budget production can do. So that would be another thing too. Is like, okay, and there was another, I forget the actor's name, but there was another kind of well-known actor that wouldn't kiss another female because he was married.
Well, I know I always forget his name, but yes, I'm familiar with him. I
Yeah,
know him from Band of Brothers, and I think he was in Landman was his
yeah,
last.
Landman. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know who, and he's a well. I mean, I've seen him around in a lot of stuff,
Yeah, I've seen him in
and
a
he always
lot
plays.
too.
He does play villain. He does play kind of like shady characters, but he's so morally opposed. He's like, I'm a married man. I don't want to be do a nude scene. And yes, he would say it did cost him some roles. It did cost him some things, but he has that integrity, and I think there's nothing wrong with that as an actor to have that integrity. And not only I'm talking about like with sexualized things, you also have to be careful of financial too, especially for commercial actors. The one and if anybody who's an actor listening to this, be careful when you sign anything that says in perpetuity, because I see that a lot sometimes where it's like, you can be in this commercial. It's a buy it. We're giving you $500, but it's in perpetuity. Don't do it because they can keep reusing that ad over and over again, and you'll never get paid. They could be making millions off of that, thousands, hundreds of that, and you won't get see any of that. And a lot of times with commercials, the one thing is if you do, you can't work for a competing product. After a amount of time. So if they've in perpetuity, like if you're doing a deodorant commercial and you sign something in perpetuity, then you cannot work for any other deodorant brand ever. And that's what a lot of times some actors sign those. Oh, I want to work right away. Don't do it. Read. And this is why, again, like even because one of the things as an agent, I do get full permission for my actors to kind of like submit on their own and try to find work on their own too. But the one thing I do ask, I said, before you sign the contracts or agreements, we need to talk about it first.
Yeah,
And
because
we need to
you
kind of figure this out.
need to go over it. Because that actually, you're doing great. You're leading into all my questions, or maybe I'm doing great because I made an outline that's logical. I don't know. We're both doing great. It did say I saw on your LinkedIn that you don't just book roles for people, you help build careers. So how is Bramante Artists, your talent agency, different from other agencies or representation? What sets yours apart?
Well, we like to give a personal touch. Like we kind of look at our talent as family. So when I said building careers, it would be again working strategic wise. I can't speak for other agents, and I don't want to sit there and say that this is what they're doing. But my goal is not to just make 10% of anything and just throw it to me. If it's not going to be right for you, but it's not going to serve you, I don't care how much money you're going to make from it. You're saying no. And if there's something that can be a very good connection builder for you and it pays little to nothing, I would advise you to take it. Even though I may not make much from that deal, I'm going to be more concerned about, again, your career at the end of the day is more important, your dignity. So, like, for example, I had a couple of years ago, there was a show that was around in New York called Madam Secretary on CBS. And they wanted to hire one of my clients for 3 days, on set as principal, not background. And they were going to pay him this, standard SAG scale rates, which is not a bad amount for, 3 days. But he had no lines. And the problem with that would be that, it was a show that was still in its earlier cycles. He would not be able to really work on Madam Secretary again, you know, as another character because he was like kind of prominent, but he had no lines.
Mhm.
So we both kind of agreed that this is not the way to go. It sounds great, but this is not, well, because he already had some line, several couple of already, credits where he had lines. So this wasn't like a step up. This would have been a step down. So no. And that's what I mean by kind of like building a career. We're trying to look out in the long term. Like going back to what my client, even the one last week, she didn't have a lot of film credits yet. So, okay, you can make that argument, but $75 for nudity. I didn't know what this guy was going to do with this film. I didn't know this filmmaker. I didn't know if he was going to put it on any sites. Is this going to hurt her in a year or two down the line? Because ultimately, also behind the scenes, she's a strong advocate for autism awareness. Her son is autistic, so she's very. And I had to think too, what ran in my mind. I'm like, is this going to hurt her down the line? If she does this role, is this going to come back, and bite her in the ass, so to speak? And so I have, it's like these are things that we think, whereas I could say I'm gonna make the $10 that you're gonna, from that, great, but no, it's not that. It's what's really helping you in the long run. So sometimes when you start working, and this is with anything, there has to be a time where you have to be okay with saying no.
Yep, absolutely. I watched another interview you did a little bit earlier today, and you mentioned in it, and it really stuck out to me, that there are two types of fear. I have independently identified this particular fear that you mentioned, which is people having a fear of success, because everybody understands fear of failure, but when you tell somebody, oh, they're afraid of winning, most people kind of look at you and it's like, what are you talking about? It was really refreshing to hear somebody else talk about fear of success. Why do you think that is? Why do you think some? Because I've seen it. I've seen it. It's like you're doing everything right, but for some reason you're scared of winning. Why are people
Yeah, it's,
doing
it's like
this?
it's like you're doing all these steps, and then that last final step you don't do. You just retract and recoil like that snake. You recoil. The reason, and there could be a variety of reasons. Every case is different, but it could be that the change, the extra set of scrutiny or eyes that are going to be on you now, the extra set of pressures that might be added to you, um, how you see yourself, if it contradicts your image. If you always had that image of you struggling, even subconsciously, it's going to go again. It's going to make you uncomfortable. Now I'm not. Now my identity may change. Now my life is going to change. And now I have to do all these things differently. Because consciously, we do want success. Everybody will sit there and tell you that they want it. But I sometimes have to say, maybe not. Also, it could be how you view money. Because views of money, I talk about this in my book too. What is your relationship with money? Because some people they may have received messages or programming that money is bad or having money makes you evil or unsavory. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think why a lot of people get so upset when they see these upsells and or people trying to make money. Because it's really about, if you're getting triggered, that's your own relationship with money talking. And so if you kind of view money as evil or vile or unacceptable, then you're going to have fear of success, because that means when you're successful, you're going to have more money. So it has a lot to do with your relationship with money. Another thing could be the relationships too, because the one truth that is sometimes a hard pill to swallow is, if people are miserable, like in your life, that are miserable with their own self, they're going to be threatened to see you being successful.
Misery loves company.
And unfortunately, this could be family.
It's
This
almost
could be the
always
people.
family.
Yeah, I would say most of the time it is. I was trying to be kind of polite here. But a lot of times it's family. And it's people that are closest to you that may be the most threatened by your success.
Mhm.
And, we're a social animal, so we're wired for connection. And anything that can threaten or runt that is going to be scary. So it may not necessarily be success that we're scared of, more like the consequences of that, the aftermath of that success. Especially as an actor, are you going to be able to handle being in the spotlight now? Are you going to be able to handle all these extra obligations and be okay with your family may not be? So, and this is the material, how one feels better or not. But I was watching an interview a while back of a famous TV psychic who had said that when he finally got his own TV show and book deals, that a lot of his family turned their back on him. And he's okay with it now, but they said it really bothered him in the beginning, because it was like, he was thinking, guys, you're not happy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, they wouldn't be if they're insecure themselves. They're not going to be happy. They're going to look at you as a threat. They're going to look at you as like a selling yourself, to that, and that you're a sellout and all that. So not everybody's going to want to see you succeed, and unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that except move. Kind of like do what you need to do.
Yeah, well,
But
move on. Yeah.
You have to move on. And I remember, not several years ago, I was having lunch with a client, and she wanted advice because the guy that she was dating, and she was potentially, thinking, going to get serious with him. Every time she would mention something about her acting career, he was shooting her down.
Red
And,
flag.
telling her. And I'm like, now you know what's going on here.
Yeah.
And most people, and I'm like, and I said to her, I was like, because she was like, well, what do? I want him to support me. I'm like, all right, you have to look at it from his perspective. It could be that he's insecure. And it could be fears that if you, let's say, get that role in a TV show or get that role in that movie, that you're not going to want to date him anymore. And of course, she's like, well, that's not true. I'm like, he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Well,
clearly, yeah. Because not for nothing, if you're gonna be, if you make it really big and you're opposite, I don't know if you're opposite Ryan Gosling.
Yeah. But also keep in mind that this is fake.
Sure. Oh no, that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the perception.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, the perception.
I should have worded that differently. I'm not suggesting that she would, because I don't know Ryan Gosling's situation. I assume he's not single, but
I don't really, but the truth of the matter is that, she's going to be more successful, and maybe what he's thinking, like, she's not going to need me anymore on a subconscious level. So therefore, I'm just going to make sure she's not. Let me discourage it all possible way.
Mm-hmm.
And so my whole thing was like, and I kind of deleted this in my book. There's nothing you can do for these type of people. You're not responsible for their insecurity, but that can hold you back too. And so, again, these are all these factors that lead to fear of success, and it's real as can be. And I see this more. I think this is more common in fear of failure.
I was just gonna say, like, it's it's probably extremely common. It's just people don't talk about it. People talk all the time about fear of failure, but fear of success is a real thing. And just like you said, I think it's way more common. It's certainly way more
Yeah,
common than people talk about, but I think you're right. I think it might be more common than fear of failure because
yeah,
I mean, fear of failure is relative. I'm really diluting this, but fear of failure is relatively, I'm not going to say easy, but it's simple to overcome.
hmm
You just shrug your shoulders and say, "Screw it. I'm just going to do it. And if I fail, you know, whatever." But
hmm
fear of success, like you said, it's just not really talked about.
Stop wasting your time on manually editing your videos. The secret AI tool will do the work for you. One of the best things about it is that it gives your video the potential to go viral. Visit this page, sign in, create a project by clicking on this button. Choose a video that you want to use. Click on the AI clip button. Wait for the magic. It is scanning through the video and looking for the parts that has the potential to go viral. Instead of editing the video by yourself, it does the work for you. It even generates headline and captions which fit your video. Another surprise is that they generate video description or social post for you to use. Once done, click export to post.
But I'm wondering, if your, background in hypnotism could help with this. And I'm just gonna be honest, it's hard for me. It's really hard for me to reconcile PhD and hypnotist in the same category. So how have you incorporated hypnotism into your work and what you do?
hmm Well, a lot of people, the reason why a lot of people have the difficulties, what they see on TV, or in the movies, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna snap my fingers, I'm gonna, do this crazy thing, and all of a sudden you're under my spell. It doesn't work that way. The one movie that I think made me really hysterical, laughing, and I couldn't really appreciate it. I know it was a great movie, great concept, was Get Out by
Mm,
Jordan Peele, because it was the depiction of hypnosis was so absurd that I'm watching this going like, this isn't. I know I'm looking at this in another lens, but this is not. I was like, this is laughable. But a lot of it is we do this on a daily basis, with people, and it's all about being suggestible, and if you weren't suggestible, you couldn't learn. You wouldn't learn. So I use it more in an indirect way rather than traditional, way of hypnotism. I don't brand myself as I don't advertise as a hypnotist. I advertise myself more as a coach. Maybe I'll integrate some stuff in there that's more solution focused and action orientated. That kind of borrows off that work of hypnotism and then where I've studied it extensively. So I'll give you an example of a daily thing. If you ever find yourself getting engrossed in a movie. Now, when you sit down and watch a movie, your brain knows it's fake. You're watching a made up thing. But yet, you get emotional. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you get angry, you get scared. But yet, there's a part of your brain that knows that what you're watching is completely fake. But yet, you're being moved emotionally because that's a hypnotic process. The same
mm,
thing goes, like, let's say you know in a relationship or any type, and your partner or your friend comes up to you and says, "Man, you look really tired." Now all of a sudden you're like, "No, I think I am," and you even yawn maybe, but you weren't tired 10 seconds ago. So why are you tired now? Because your friend, your partner, indirectly hypnotized you to believe you're tired. Just like you go into a room and one person starts yawning, everybody starts yawning, and that they're notice how sleepier they're getting. You were fine 5 minutes ago. What changed? So it's a process that we go through all the time. And there's no such thing as someone who says they cannot be hypnotized. The reality, though, is, and I'll say with a caveat when people say that, I'm like, yes, you will not be hypnotized against your will.
mhm.
That's the one thing that's true. You cannot be hypnotized against your will. And you cannot do any, we can't have influence free will in a sense. And we really can't, you cannot be hypnotized to do anything morally opposed to doing.
So to kind of pivot a bit on that, as someone who can get very anxious depending on what's going on, and sometimes unreasonably so, are there any little, using sort of that much more preferred definition of hypnosis, or rather integrating of some of those, mental, what would you call those mental techniques? Any little tips you can give somebody who just feels overwhelmed in a moment to kind of help them, just breathe and say, it's not
I
that
think
bad.
I think you just kind of answered that in a sense, breathing. Because most of the time when somebody's in the midst of an anxiety attack or a moment of anxiety, they're breathing so shallow. And it's take a deep breath in and just close your eyes and just take a moment to just calm yourself down a bit. One of the things, and this is why even I think the placebo effect is so powerful. Smokers, for instance, will say that smoking relaxes them. It's like that cigarette relaxes them. And I'm going to challenge you because in order to smoke effectively, you have to deep breathe. So it's not the cigarette that's doing it. It's the deep breathing that you need to smoke that cigarette.
You're
And you could do that
as far
without.
as yeah, as far as I know, you're 100% right because I forget the publication, but it was legitimate. It wasn't like a Yahoo, or I guess that's a little old for the Gen Z kids out there. It wasn't just a Google, it was, an article that you found on Google. It was a
Hmm.
legitimate scientific paper, and they actually said the irony of people feeling relaxed while smoking is the nicotine being a stimulant actually takes away from some of the positive and relaxing effects of the deep breathing you do while you're smoking. But they
Yeah.
did a big study and found that, like, well, no, it's not the cigarette. It's literally you're telling yourself, you're forcing yourself to take deep breaths over and over and over again. And the irony is that the nicotine is taking away some of that benefit.
Yeah, because it's a stimulant.
Hmm.
It's gonna actually. Well, that's what keeps you, and that's when somebody says it's like I wonder if because I've never smoked, I don't, but I often wonder when you say that because okay, nicotine makes you more anxious, stimulant makes you more anxious, deep breathing calms you down. So is it really this? Is it just more about regulating your body more?
Yeah, well,
So
and
if
not
you did
only
more,
not only not only that, I mean, it's in the name. Think about it. You take a smoke break,
yes,
meaning
and
you
it
stop. Yeah. You stop
stop what
everything
you're
you were
doing.
doing, you stop working, you take, I don't know how long the average smoke break is. I, like you, I've never smoked a day in my life, so I don't know. But,
Yeah.
you take a break and you just enjoy your cigarette,
Hmm.
and it's no wonder you think you feel better because of the cigarette, because there's a pattern there that you
Right.
correlation doesn't equal causation, but it's a thing that
Yeah.
you always feel this way when you always do this thing, but it may not necessarily be the thing.
Hmm.
So don't smoke, kids.
Yeah. Don't do it. No. No.
um,
Breathe. That'll
yeah,
be it. Yeah.
breathe, breathe air. So a little bit funnier. I'm curious about your perspective on this, being that you're in the industry and you deal with actors and the
Hmm.
business side of it all the time. So we've all seen the Pedro Pascal memes, but it does seem like a really common occurrence when an actor or actress shows up and really makes a splash, has a breakout role, and suddenly they're everywhere. Is this explainable why this happens? Is it actually something that happens organically, or is this kind of like we talked about with not picking on the Paul brothers, but we kind of touched on it earlier? Is this manufactured by the industry itself?
To some level, yes, because there's a lot of hype that's built up over that. Now, yeah, you can have that breakout role that'll just, be there forever. But a lot of times, if you don't keep that momentum up, you might have that month or two where it's like you're the hottest thing, and then all of a sudden it's right that drop. Unless you have that team behind you that is constantly putting new stuff out there.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's going to become like a one. It's like in the music world, like the one hit wonder, or it's like okay, the song. may have been number one, an artist made number one in the charts, and then 2 months later, everyone forgets, like, wait, who's that?
Right.
So,
Well, as we sort of get wrapping up, and again, I appreciate your time. I have to talk about AI with you because it seems to be
mhm.
something that you care about a lot. You, like I said, you talk about AI a lot. We use AI, like I said earlier, to enhance and create here across our podcasts. How do you use AI in what you do? And I assume it's helped you because otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it.
Of course not. No, I would not be doing it. I would say, the biggest thing to help me is in as a tool, as an aid, not as a replacement. I don't think right now, at least from what I've seen, I mean, it's getting better and better at the moment. It's a lot better than what it was a year ago, even 2 years ago. And it's going to be a lot better in another year. But right now, it's not, I don't think it can replace human at all. I know people are like, oh, so, there's some people who say, well, AI can take my job. And no, it's not. It's not going to do that. It's not going to take your job away. You cannot replace creativity. Automation, yes, maybe. So I like to use it as a partnership, as a tool, as an aid, but not as a complete replacement.
Yep, I can attest to that. Chat GPT and I have a wonderful relationship because it helps me in the things that I've always sort of lacked talent wise. But it's like you said, it's never a full replacement because sometimes Chat GPT will create something and I'm just like, no,
Completely. Like
that's
what are you talking about?
yeah, that's
Um,
terrible. And then I just do it myself. But it's a time saver for
yeah,
sure.
it is a time saver. And what I often like to say is come up with an idea first,
Hmm.
before don't let like ChatGPT give you that idea and then run with it.
My favorite example of using AI to
Hmm.
I create in air quotes is so I'm not an artist. I don't have an artistic bone in my body, but we did a series of videos that were previewing an event, and I thought it would be fun to sort of create some cartoon images of the impending matches, right? And Chat
Hmm.
GPT nailed it, but I gave it the direction. I had the idea and I gave it specific instructions.
Yeah.
It was supplementing my inability to draw a picture, but it did what my idea was, and it just did what I couldn't do. And
Hmm.
it was stupendous. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So, but I think the main thing is that you use it as a good tool. And like why it hit you right on target there is because you prompted it well.
Hmm.
And that's where I think a lot of people don't understand. If you want it to give results, you've got to give it explicit instructions. If I turn around and say, "Well, write me a podcast episode on this," it's going to give me crap. I hate to say it's going to give me crap. But if
Absolutely,
I
it will.
say, "I want this, and this, and this," can you give me an outline of what maybe I should be talking about? And here's what I want to cover, and here's the frameworks I'm going to cover. And I'm pretty much laying down a good significant chunk of the work.
Hmm.
It'll give me out a great like talking points even like oh great okay, but I gave it information. So the important thing and the important thing is not to accept the first thing that comes to you.
Oh yeah, I revise all the time.
You have to revise and you have to massage it and gently and go back and forth even or just take it and go write it. Revise and put in your own words, but make sure your own voice is in there because
Oh, it
I was
has
writing
to.
a lot of content beforehand on LinkedIn and articles on that. Now, if I started using ChatGPT, people would know this is not Albert. This doesn't sound like Albert. My name may be on it, but people would be kind of wondering, who are you and what did you do with Albert?
Yeah, I like you. That's one place where I have never used Chat GPT yet is in any blog post that I write. Because I have no illusions. I'm no author, but I at least like to when I write, I have a pretty distinct way of writing. It's more conversational writing. So it just like you said, if I were to use Chat GPT to write my blog posts, it would be immediately apparent. There would
Yeah.
be such a drastic change that, yeah. So from where you sit, what does the future of AI look like in relation to entertainment and education? Because you also mentioned across the things you do that you see AI implementation in education being not only unavoidable, but something that's, we should be really, really looking at because it could
Well,
totally transform.
it can help us. It can give us, like I said, the brainstorming ideas, different perspectives, introduces different perspectives and different viewpoints. But we got to do it in a careful way. I would say, you know, maybe 60-40, where 60% we do the work, 40% AI can help, or even most generous cases would be 50-50, but it should never be 100%.
Yeah.
And as a because I've taught several years, I can tell you as in an education setting is we know as professors know exactly when a student will use ChatGPT, because when you start to sound better than I do, there's a good chance. And also the thing about AI is the writing; they tend to use a lot of great words, same words, tapestry. You know, I don't understand, or well, let's delve into this. I don't think before AI, I've never seen anyone use tapestry in that set. Like unless you're describing artwork.
Right. Yeah. That's a
So
pretty it's a pretty
when I see
distinct
a
word.
student when I say a student writes a paper, response paper recently, and mentions the word tapestry, I'm like, hmm and the reason why it's a little tough to prove it's AI because it's original content even. Because if you and I put the same prompt in, it's going to give us a different output depending on the exact moment. The one thing though that you can do is if anybody's listening as an educator, ask a question. Like when somebody says hands you a paper, say, you made a great statement here. What did you mean by that? Because if you wrote the paper yourself, you should know what you meant. Or
Very
you
valid.
used an interesting word. Why did you choose to use that word?
Very valid. That's a great idea,
Yeah,
and I never thought about that.
and this is how you could just cut. Because again, if you truly wrote the paper, you know why you use that word. And sometimes I've caught I haven't heard this hasn't happened to me, but another professor was reading a paper once that a student wrote, and they didn't bother to proofread the paper because in the middle of the paper was and as a large language model, I cannot, and I went.
Ooh.
I would have fell out laughing. I wouldn't have gotten like mad that the student cheated. I would just thought this is hilarious, and I'm going to troll the student as much as professionally as I can right now. So I think what the professor did, and this is already this on a forum, he said, "I'm going to give the Chat GPT an A minus. I'm going to give you an F for plagiarism."
Is
And
using
and
AI technically plagiar? Yeah, I guess it would be, right? Because it's a large language model, so it's pulling from.
it is and it's not at the same time. If you're doing it to help you write the paper, fine. If
Yeah.
you're doing it to get ideas, but the truth is, and usually a lot of colleges now have the AI policy that at least say it up front that this was. And most of the time, as long as you're not directly plagiarizing from it, if you use it as a brainstorming tool, it's not going to count against you. But you be fully transparent in that say this was, loosely used with AI. And I think a lot, even like a lot of the publishing platforms on LinkedIn and Amazon or okay, as long as you say that. But if you
Yeah.
just try to, you can get in trouble online if you try to post the work on your own without
Yeah, see, it's
disclosure.
interesting because I mentioned the podcast we make using the Google Notebook LM AI. This goes back to my stickler for accuracy. Technically, it doesn't meet the requirements to have to be identified as AI generated on YouTube, but we do put
Hmm.
in every description that this podcast was generated by using Google Notebook. It's in the credits, like at the end of the podcast,
Yeah.
it says generated by. And to me, and Max would make fun of me and say that I'm just I have too much integrity. But to me, I feel like when you do that and you're transparent, it's at least okay because at least you're being upfront about it. And that podcast is not necessarily meant to be taken totally seriously because we're very transparent about the fact that the people that are talking to you right now do not exist.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's transparency is important. I think well there's a couple of issues that I feel that are a bit concerning, and that's when people turn to AI chatbots for partnership or companionship.
Yeah.
That is a major concern of mine because again, it's artificial. And Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has said this is not what we created, ChatGPT for, to be a companionship. Also, a lot of times, especially depending on the large language model you use, but like ChatGPT will kind of tell you everything's a great idea.
South Park's most recent episode played with that gag so much. So that sounds like
Yeah,
a great idea because what did she say? She wanted to Sharon asked ChatGPT to get back at Randy, and she was like, "I have an idea for a business where I want to sell. Oh, what was it? I want to sell fruits as just something completely insane." And it was like, "That's a great idea. Do you want to brainstorm some ideas?" It
yeah,
was so
and I'm
funny.
like, okay, but that's true. That's something where you gotta be mindful, and also AI is therapist, which is like, I don't know how that is possible because again, it's all about body language. It's about reading, and calibrating on what the person is saying.
Hmm.
So, because some people ask me, "Are you worried about like AI taking over therapy?" I'm like, they're not going to be a very good therapist. I can tell you that right now, because
Yeah.
it's not going to be able to calibrate what I'm saying right now or my verbal action.
Although
Narrate.
they're making those conversational ones now, which I do not use the Chat GPT voice thing because it already tricked me into giving it a name.
Yeah.
And I realized what I had done. I was like, oh no, I just named it. At least I'm not calling it a he because I named my Chat GPT bot Prometheus because, well,
Yeah. Hmm. No, some people do name it, which I'm like, okay, that's interesting that you did that. Okay. Don't I haven't done that yet. I haven't gotten to that level yet. It's just that but yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see, and I think even this conversation will be very interesting in 6 months from now because it may be different. What's coming
no,
out?
they just had that big update, which I see a little bit of difference, but I'm a creature of
I
habit, so
don't.
I just told mine to go back and do it the way I asked you to do it before.
Yeah, I switched back to 4 because I'm like I don't see the way that they were building up 5. I think it was a massive overhype. Because the way
Yeah.
when Five first was being talked about a couple months ago, it was like, oh, this is gonna be the most blow your mind. I'm like, no, I actually think 4 is better. 4 blew my mind more than 5 did.
I got to be
And
honest. Yeah, I think so too. Because when I first started using it in four, because I was this is a common thread through my life. I resist something and then I finally adopt it, and I go, "What was I thinking?" I resisted the iPhone for 4 years, and then I got
Mhm.
one, and I said, "What was I thinking? This is so great." But I'm also kind of thankful for that because to me, it seems like I don't buy into the hype as much. So then when I finally start to use something, I view it for its utility, not so much for the newness.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's why I have
no,
not
yeah,
changed that aspect about myself quite yet, but who
mhm.
knows? We don't know where the
Right,
future is going.
nope. And like I said, it could always be good to keep our eye on that. So
Yeah. Well, my last question for you was, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? But you answered that right at the outset. So
sure, yeah, I have a couple ideas. So, I'm playing around with a couple different ideas. But when I first started guesting on podcasts, I really didn't think I was going to. But now that I'm doing it, I'm like, this is fun. And
yeah, my running joke, and actually I did this. I I asked ChatGPT one day just for fun. I said, Based on everything that I've given you thus far, create an image that you think represents me." And it created an image of me doing multiple podcasts by
Yeah, it did the
name.
same. It
Yeah.
did the same for me. It was like, and I thought to myself, like, okay, this is interesting. And that's that. It is interesting, but it's just it's going by what we feed it, and that's where a lot of
Yeah.
people. It's great, but it's like, when somebody's like, "Oh, this is mind blowing." No, it's not. It's reading what you feed it.
Oh, I know. I just found it very funny because the other thing I constantly say is that when you start podcasting, you kind of get addicted to it because it's fun and it's
Well,
a
I can
good
tell you
time.
bring the guest. Oh
It's
yeah.
and had it not been for this podcast, you and I probably would have never met.
No, and if it weren't for me wanting to be a guest, I wouldn't have done that. Now I'm thinking to myself, I should have been applying for guesting a long time ago. But I just enjoy it, and I really just it's fun, and the one thing that I really find so valuable about it, and this is why I really want to start my own, is I'm meeting so many people that I never would have normally met.
I have so many friends now that I only met through podcasting. Had I not been doing
Mhm.
podcasting, I would have, and some of my best friends now I only know because I was doing podcasting. And
Yeah,
that's something I talk about when people are doing podcasting because they ask me, well, how do I get guests? Just ask people. That's
it is so
yeah, I met all those
it's
people
so
just
easy.
because I shot them a message. I shot them a message, and yeah, a lot of people don't respond. Some people have politely declined, and it's like, hey, man, no problem. But like, if you don't ask, you'll never get a yes.
Yeah. If you don't, and that's the whole thing too. It's like this goes with anything. If you don't take action, you'll never know. And some people are like, "Well, I'm afraid they're going to say no." If you don't ask, they are going to say no because they're not going to know that you asked. So, and even myself, like sometimes I pitch myself a podcast and I was told flat out no. I'm like, okay, yeah, fine. That's okay. I'm not going to be crumpled
Yeah,
by it. But if you don't take the action, you're never gonna know what can happen. But yes, I'll be emailing you about that.
excellent, Albert. Well, again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun talking to you today. Where can people find you if they want more information?
So you can find me on LinkedIn under Albert Bramante. It's probably the best way. I post a lot of articles and blog posts and short video clips, and so feel free to reach out to me there. Follow me on Instagram at Dr. Al Bramante. Very easy to find there.
All righty. And that will all be linked in the description below, as well as a link to your book, which, like I
Sure.
said, full transparency, haven't read it yet, but I have a feeling you're going to want to read it too. And if you subscribe to the Arete podcast, you like to read. So check it out there
Mhm.
too. Fantastic conversation, Albert.
Thank you.
I can go for so much longer, but I know you've got things to
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah, to head off here, but thank you. Thank
no
you again.
problem. Thank you very much. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Anything we can do to help, just let me know.
Of course. Great.
All right. Thank you again.
Bye.